You think Welcome to Derry is about a killer clown, but it's so much more, so much worse. It isn't about a clown, it's about agriculture, about a town that plants children, waters them with fear, and harvests them. Then for 27 years, it forgets any of this happened, until the cycle starts again. And for the first time in this franchise, we don't just see the monster, we see the machinery, we see the wires holding the stage up, and for a brief moment, we see the wizard behind the curtain.
Don't you dare speak to me that way! I am a god, an eater of worlds!
And somehow, against all modern Hollywood odds, Welcome to Derry doesn't shrink the horror, it makes it biblical. Every time a franchise announces a spin-off series from a film IP, you feel it, that tightening in your chest, because it's a coin flip. Either it's a faithful expansion of the IP, or it's a derivative cash grab dressed up as world building. On one side, you get something like Cobra Kai, The Penguin, The Gentleman, shows that understand the DNA of the property and faithfully expands it while staying true to the source. These shows didn't just ride nostalgia, they deepened it. On the other side, you get a slow, humiliating erosion of once sacred IP. Shows that strip mine a beloved franchise until it collapses under its own branding. The ones that misunderstand the tone, the horror, the myth, and replaces it with self-aware sludge, Alien Earth, The Acolyte, Ironheart, corporate necromancy, nostalgia cosplay. And in a media landscape where most writers seem convinced audiences want ironic detachment instead of myth, it would have been very easy for Welcome to Derry, to become quirky prequel energy. Instead, it does something rare. It respects the cosmology, it respects the horror, and most importantly, it respects scale. Because this isn't a story about kids beating a clown. This is a story about what happens when they don't. The show is set primarily in 1962, one of Pennywise's feeding years. If you remember the films, you know the cycle. Every 27 years, it awakens, feeds for about a year, then hibernates. The movies showed us 1988 and 2016, the characters as kids and then as adults. The novel alternated between the timelines. This series does something smarter. It splits into 3 narrative tracks: the kids of the town, the adults from the military base, and Pennywise himself. And that third one is the shift, because for the first time, the monster isn't just lurking in gutters, he's being studied. It starts small. In 1962, a boy named Matty Clemens disappears, just another missing kid in Derry. And immediately, the tone is different from the films. There's no whimsical adventure energy, no Spielberg glow. This is colder, more procedural. His disappearance sparks a small-scale investigation led by his friend Lily and a tight circle of kids. They follow the trail to a movie theater. A flying demon baby rips them apart. Only 2 girls survive, Lily and Ronnie. No musical swells, no ironic wink, just slaughter. Ronnie's father, Hank, a black man in 1960s Maine, is immediately blamed. And here's where the show earns respect. It doesn't turn racism into a sermon, it turns it into camouflage. Pennywise thrives in conflict. Division is fertilizer. If there is tension, if there is prejudice, if there is mistrust, then disappearances can be explained away. Blamed, buried, the horror hides behind human ugliness. The 2 girls recruit 3 more kids. Will Hanlon, father of Mike Hanlon in the films, Rich Santos, and Marge Truman, mother of Richie Tosser in the films. Connecting these kids to the ones of the films aren't just fan service. It's a deliberate connection pointing out an obvious fact about Derry. The horror is, and always was, generational. The kids try to gather proof that something supernatural is happening in order to clear Hank's name. And that's when Pennywise notices them. Not in a chosen one way, but in a quality livestock way. The attacks escalate. Stalking, psychological targeting, manipulation of trauma. And unlike the Losers Club, these kids don't have some mythical destiny. They're not special, they're just in the way. Major Leroy Hanlon transfers to Derry with his family. Yes, Will's father and Mike Hanlon's grandfather. Leroy, a high-ranking black officer in the 1960s, encounters racism. But again, it's not woke messaging. It's contextual. It's atmospheric. It's part of Derry's rot. He is pulled into a secret military project by Base Commander Shaw. Locate and capture a supernatural entity operating in town. Leroy is assisted by Dick Halloran, who you will remember as the psychic chef from The Shining. The Stephen King universe Easter eggs are all over the show, and the show includes lore about Pennywise, not just from the It novel, but also from whispers about it in King's other works, like the Dark Tower series. Lesser show writers would trip over themselves, trying to make this a multiverse spectacle. Instead, it's clinical. All the meta connections aren't there just as fan service or Easter eggs, but as part of the narrative. It is used to expand the identity of Pennywise, not belittle or cheapen it. The army wants to weaponize the supernatural, not destroy Pennywise, but put a leash on him. What's worse than a cosmic predator? A government that thinks it can control one. The series does something the films and novel only hinted at, but also mentioned in some of Stephen King's other stories. It explores what Pennywise actually is, how it functions, and its history, through psychic intrusions, through Halloran's mental assaults, through visions pulled from Native American memory. We see the meteor crash, we see the entity begin feeding on early settlers and tribes alike, and how the natives built a spiritual cage to contain it. We see how Derry became a hunting ground, and in one of the best sequences in the show, Halloran locks Pennywise inside an illusion during a psychic confrontation. For a brief moment, the mask slips. We see how Pennywise thinks. Not in taunts, not in jokes, in hunger. It doesn't hate children. It prefers them. Their fear is richer. Their imagination amplifies flavor. Adults grow dull, rational, less nutritious. That perspective shift is what elevates the series. Pennywise becomes less theatrical villain and more cosmic horror. When we finally get to the finale, you expect escalation, mythic rule changes, secret lore, some retcon that empowers the future Losers Club. It doesn't happen. The finale does not rewrite the rules of the universe. It doesn't secretly weaken Pennywise, or lay hidden groundwork for the kids in the film to achieve eventual victory. Instead, it reinforces the cyclical nature of Derry's curse. The army destabilizes the cage. The kids, Leroy and Halloran, manages to reseal it. Not destroy, not defeat, reseal. The feeding cycle ends. The town forgets. Life resumes. And that's the horror. It shows us the cyclical nature of Derry's curse, showing that this has all happened before and will happen again, until someone finally breaks the pattern. And that brings us to the major difference between the It films and the It Welcome to Derry series. The characters. In the films, the group of kids known as the Losers are special. They alone, from all the groups that have faced Pennywise previously, are able to hold onto their belief and unity in their group, and return as adults to face it while knowing what it is. The Losers are special because they refuse to forget. The kids in this show are not the losers. They are just lucky. They don't kill Pennywise, they just relock the cage. They don't really do anything meaningful, except survive. But that is because the show isn't really about them. This show is about a time when the cycle completes, where violence blooms, feeds, and goes dormant again. The kids here aren't heroes. They're statistical anomalies. The town resets, which makes the Losers' eventual victory feel less inevitable and more sacred. Because, thematically, this show is not about standing up to evil. That already happened in the films. This show is about understanding how the entity and its feeding cycle works. The 27-year cycle isn't arbitrary. It mirrors generational memory decay. It's the time it takes for trauma to be repressed, for witnesses to grow up and rationalize their experiences, for civic memory to dissolve. Derry metabolizes violence, consumes tragedy, it suppresses it, and then it prepares the soil for it to bloom again. Fear spreads through rumor, silence, denial. The adults aren't oblivious, they're complicit. Stability matters more than truth, and that psychological bargain sustains the entity. Every attempted ritual, every symbolic cage, every desperate act of containment fails, not because people are weak, but because they misunderstand the scale of what they are facing. They treat it as a monster, when it's part of the infrastructure. The horror isn't that it exists. The horror is that it has always existed, and will continue to exist, until by some miracle, someone breaks the pattern. That's what makes the Losers Club special. Not destiny, not prophecy, statistical anomaly. Welcome to Derry doesn't cheapen their victory in the films. It magnifies it. It shows how many cycles failed, how many groups survived but didn't win, how many times the cage was patched instead of shattered. It reframes the films ending not as inevitable but miraculous. And that's why this show works. It doesn't dilute the myth, it deepens it. It doesn't humanize the monster, it makes him incomprehensible. And in doing so, it makes Derry feel less like a haunted town and more like a living organism feeding something buried beneath it. So why does this show work when most other shows don't? Modern Hollywood often misdiagnoses audiences. They think we want commentary when we want mythology. They think we want subversion when we want coherence. Stranger Things tried to recreate 80s adventure nostalgia. This show understands it is the thing Stranger Things is imitating. This show doesn't lecture. It doesn't modernize for clout. It expands the cosmology with respect for tone. It makes Pennywise bigger without making him weaker. And that is the balancing act. Explain too much, you demystify the horror. Explain too little, you stagnate. This show answers the questions, and what's left is not comfort, but cosmic indifference. In conclusion, Welcome to Derry does something subtle and brilliant. It doesn't make the losers stronger retroactively. It makes their victory rarer. By showing us a cycle where no one breaks it, the eventual breaking becomes extraordinary. The show maps the machinery. The films show the revolt. And when you rewatch 2017's It after this series, something changes. You understand what they're actually fighting. Not just a clown, not just fear, but the immortal cosmic horror that can see very little beyond its own hunger. And the fact they win at all, that's the real miracle. But what do you think? Did It Welcome to Derry elevate the mythology? Or did it explain too much and risk neutralizing the cosmic terror? Did making Pennywise the central force make the story feel bigger? Or do you prefer when he was just a shadow in the gutter? Let me know in the comments. I'll read all of them, even the unhinged ones. If you enjoyed this review and want more deep dives into movies and shows that actually respects its own mythology, please subscribe so I might get monetized and be able to afford more time mucking about in the Hollywood sludge. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.